Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another YouTube video. I am All in Crypto, and today we are going to be talking about the Cardano cake. What is the Cardano cake? Many of you are probably asking yourself. Well, that's what we're going to be getting into in this video. I think one of the main criticisms, or some of the main criticisms that Cardano get really come from a lack of understanding. And in this video, we're going to be talking about Cardano's layer 1, which consists of the ledger, the network, and the consensus. We're going to be talking about the kind of plans and visions for that. And then we're going to be talking about layer 2s and really trying to understand and put together the vision and the kind of plan for Cardano to help not only you guys, but myself. It's always good to sort of refresh these things, understand what is being undertaken here. And I think for the people that do understand Cardano in regards to its design, in regards to its future proofing, in regards to all the different moving parts that it's looking to bring together and correlate, it is really a sort of fleet in cryptography and blockchain. And hopefully by the end of this video, I would have, using the article that we're going to look at from 2022, really given a good overview and representation of Cardano and why you should be excited about it from a sort of technological point of view. And in doing this, I'm a big believer that those of you that are invested in Cardano in order to, perhaps you think it's going to go up in price and you're going to make money off that, it's always a good idea to understand what it is you're investing in. So we're going to do exactly that in this video. Before I dive into it all, guys, I want to give a quick shout out to my stake pool. We have been validating and helping to validate and run the Cardano network since 2021. You can see that over here. And we are still here today, despite going through a bear market and it being unprofitable to do so at times. If you guys do have some spare Cardano, we bring Cardano content regularly. Please do consider staking with the All in Crypto stake pool. On to the article and the understanding of Cardano in regards to layer 1, layer 2. It doesn't just discuss layer 1 and layer 2. It kind of really paints a beautiful picture of not only Cardano, but some of the moving parts to it and solutions that are here. Many of them on mainnet, whether it be Mithril, Hydra, and whatever it be, which weren't on mainnet at the time of this article being written. Side chains, which we're seeing come online, and layer 2s like Milkamida, others that perhaps weren't about at the time of this publication, but they are indeed here today. And it's came a long way, really, since in the sort of nearly 12 months since this article was written. So layer 1 and layer 2, all you need to know. Let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start off with layer 1. Layer 1 definition, imagine a wedding cake. So they use a really nice analogy, which is why I said we're going to try and understand the Cardano cake in this video. They use a really nice analogy of a wedding cake because you can kind of visually, using it as a example, see just how layer 1 works and why it is the way it is, why it's actually intended to be the way it is, and actually how these layers are sat above it, but all rely on the layer 1, and this is why it only has the functionalities that it has in terms of maybe TPS and other such things, although we'll talk about how the layer 1 itself can actually improve. So imagine a wedding cake with different tiers, i.e. layers, if you will, and the figurine of a couple on top. That beautiful cake rests on a solid stand, the base. For all intents and purposes, that robust and solid cake stand is the first layer, i.e. layer 1, that supports the cake's infrastructure. You can probably see where this is going. In a blockchain, layer 1 is the base network upon which the rest of the layers, layer 2 solutions, are built. Layer 1 functionalities. With this visual schematic in mind, Cardano is the layer 1 base network, which itself includes 3 independent layers. So how many of you guys know about the 3 layers? This is why I found this article worth making a video about. So you have the network layer, the consensus layer, and of course the ledger layer. So the network layer, this layer maintains the connection between all the distributed nodes in the Cardano network, obtains new blocks from the network as they are produced by block production nodes, builds newly minted transactions into blocks and transmits blocks between nodes. Then you have the consensus layer. This layer performs 2 fundamental functions. Running the Ouroboros consensus protocol, this layer takes decisions like adopting blocks, choosing between competing chains, if there are any, and deciding when to produce blocks of its own, and maintaining all the state that is required to make the decisions taken in the consensus layer. What does it mean by choosing between two competing chains? I want to explain this concept because a lot of people don't realize that this happens with blockchains. It happens with Bitcoin. It happens with pretty much all blockchains that have the blockchain model. You have your blockchain, which is going along, block, block, block. But what will often happen, certainly when you have so many people validating a network, is there'll be from this main chain, which is the truth source, which has been sort of you come to consensus about, there'll be another chain that will go along with it. And often this smaller chain is discarded until or gets discarded until the Cardano sort of consensus is reached and we go back onto the main chain. Or in some cases, the actual other chain can get adopted and sort of segue off and continue to do it in this sort of fashion. It's rather confusing stuff. There is a terminology for it. I actually remember speaking to John Wood, and he kind of clued me up to that concept that actually with blockchains, people just envision this one big chain. Often it can kind of splinter, and you can get another chain, and the validators will sort of move to that until they get sort of directed onto the main chain. This is all stuff happening on the layer one. By the way, unless it's deliberately being done by the layer 2, which doesn't actually affect the sort of layer 1, if you will. Then you have the ledger layer. This layer specifies what the state of the ledger looks like and how the ledger must be updated for each new block. The ledger layer consists exactly of pure functionality that specifies the transactions between successive ledger states as derived from the formula ledger rules using the extended EUTXO model, EUTXO according to accounting model. The state transition are driven by the set of transactions that are contained within the Cardano blocks and by major events such as epoch boundaries and transitions. The consensus layer does not need to know the exact nature of the ledger states, but it almost takes like certain reference points. As a whole, these three layers form layer 1 solution for Cardano. So, the layer 1, this base, has these three main components to it, and that makes up the layer 1. We need to do an entire video on EUTXO. Anybody who's sent funds on Cardano will know that actually you can send pretty much an unlimited amount of tokens in one transaction, which is nothing short of genius. It adopts Bitcoin sort of model. I've always said, actually, if there was any sort of smart contract blockchain for Bitcoin maxis, it would be Cardano. But we will move on and actually see Cardano being very similar to Bitcoin in terms of how its organic nature, if you will. So layer 1 scalability. So you can increase layer 1 scalability, but you don't want to do it to a point where you jeopardize security, i.e. in this case, the base layer's stability, because the layers above it essentially won't work. They'll be invalidated. So looking at the wedding cake again, it's big, isn't it? With all of those tiers stacked on top of one another. But look at the base, the cake stand. That first layer has certain dimensions and cannot be any bigger. Equally, it needs to be enough to support the tiers that sit above it. The stuff that rests on it can only be of a certain size, and this is exactly the reason why wedding cakes have multiple tiers. Every tier, i.e. layer in this case, adds something to the base, a new filling, frosting, decoration, etc. In other words, every tier scales the base layer up, and it can add, in this case, different functionalities to it. For example, Midnight's privacy. That'll be a tier, a separate chain, if you will, or a separate layer that will rely on the base layer for security, for truth almost, but also, add this extra layer where they'll deal with their own interesting things of how they look to facilitate privacy. So decentralized public networks face a similar problem just as a cake stand can only fit finite amount of slices. The base layer, the layer 1, can only process a certain amount of transactions. If you try to add more slices than the stand cake takes, they will start falling off the edges and a mess will ruin somebody's big day. Equally, the nodes in the layer 1 network can only process so many transactions before congestion occurs. As the user base grows, so does the need for more nodes to process transactions. To resolve this problem, the network needs to scale, or else transactions will start falling off the edge, so to speak. There are ways to scale up layer 1 network. Increase block size, for example. So the blocks carry more transaction data. Block size was recently increased from 8 kilobytes to 72 kilobytes, a 12.5 increase. This is one of the ways that Cardano will scale in 2022. I think there's been an increase of this again. Is it to 80 something? You guys can let me know in the comment section. Returning to our wedding cake visualization, adding tiers not only makes the cake bigger, it also introduces a very useful feature, the ability to make every tier different to the base. We can add different flavors, fillings, and designs, and so on, independently of the first layer to cater for different guests and different preferences in blockchain. Adding a new layer 2 not only allows the layer 1 to scale, it also enables transactions and processes to happen independently of the layer 1. And they can also do this in a different way. So it's truly, this has always been, not to use the pun here, baked into Cardano's design. Ouroboros was built with being a consensus layer for multiple chains in mind. And actually, I think that Cardano was really one of the first in regards to this layer 2 vision of the future. If you look at Ethereum, more transaction volume happens on the layer 2s than Ethereum itself. A lot of people still have beefs with Ethereum not being able to scale. Cardano is significantly cheaper than Ethereum, by the way. But the layer 1, Ethereum's layer 1 doesn't actually need to necessarily scale. The layer 2s can scale for it, essentially. And as long as it happens in one interface, and in many cases you don't even know you're doing it, there's no beef there. And you've got the sort of verifiability and the security from the layer 1. And I think, again, Cardano was really one of the first on this kind of journey. So the layer 1 scaling solutions in Cardano are block size increase. The bigger the block, the more transactions you can carry in it. So you can essentially add more transactions into the block. So you keep the same sort of epoch dimensions, but within each block, there's more transactions. So you can sort of get down the congestion. Pipeline improves blockchain propagation times by coalescing validators and propagation. The goal is for blocks to be propagated to at least 95% of peers within 5 seconds by reducing the dead time between blocks. The block propagation overhead. This provides the headroom to make more aggressive scaling changes, such as increasing block size, increasing Plutus parameters and limits. You've got input endorsers further down the line. Input endorsers will improve block propagation times and throughput by allowing transactions to be separated into pre-constructed blocks. This improves the consistency of block propagation time and allows higher transactions rates. You've got memory and CPU parameters, which essentially I think will fall on the stake pools. You've got Plutus script enhancements, you've got node endorsements, and you've got on-disk storage. Interlude the blockchain trilemma. The scalability of a distributed system, such as a blockchain, is a complex quandary. There is a general consensus that a proper blockchain system must have 3 properties: scalability, security, and decentralization. But an equal widespread belief is the so-called trilemma, which dictates that decentralized systems can only provide 2 of these properties while sacrificing the 3rd. So this is, I think Vitalik really popularized this sort of triangle of doing my Jay-Z there. The components of blockchain just having it basically dictates that you can't achieve all 3 in equal measures, because you'll always sacrifice one component for the other. However, Cardano, of course, believes that this isn't the case, and that with layer 2s, not sacrificing security because of the layer 1, you can kind of tackle all these issues. You can sort of tailor make these issues when and if they're needed. So we'll skip past this bit. It talks about vertical and horizontal scaling, which is the concept of Ouroboros sort of being a beating heart. And we're going to do a whole video on Ouroboros and really the magic of it. Because if you think about the human system and you think about Ouroboros as the beating heart every time it beats, every time it validates a block, pumps blood around the system to the different organs, which can be layer 2, side chains, whatever it may be, that have their own functionality in maintaining the entire system. I've always thought that is a great way to sort of look at Cardano. So let's move on to layer 2s. Skip quite a bit of that. Layer 2 definitions: an additional off-chain protocol that works on top of the layer 1 blockchain. Parties can securely transfer funds from the blockchain into an off-chain protocol, settle transactions in this protocol independently of the underlying chain, and safely transfer funds back to the underlying chain as needed. Layer 2 protocols improve overall throughput and scalability because they reduce network congestion. Layer 2 scaling solutions on Cardano. Of course, we have sidechains, which we're a big fan of. Although sidechains are not layer 2 solutions, they are defined as a way to enable multiple blockchains to communicate with each other and have one react to events. In the other is a separate blockchain connected to the main chain. The main chain, also known as parent chain, or you can see Polkadot have a similar almost design. There's lots of chains out there that are going for us. All blockchains right now are moving towards this kind of side chain or parachain or layer 0 sort of kind of concept. So through a two-way mechanism, the bridge that enables, quoted here because it's a bit more complicated than a traditional bridge, that enables tokens and other digital assets from one chain to be used in another are returned to the original chain. Assets can be moved between chains as needed. One single parent chain can have multiple interoperable side chains connected to it, which may operate in completely different ways. EVM side chains on Cardano include DC Sparks Multimeter, IOG's EVM sidechain, and so on. And then, of course, you've got Hydra, which is a layer 2 scaling solution, where essentially we've done a whole video on this. You take the transactions, you open up a Hydra head, and eventually you'll have dApps that will be able to open up their own Hydra heads. You take that transaction off chain, you can process, really scale up as much as you want. You know, this million transactions per second kind of thesis comes from Hydra, and that's where Cardano will eventually get to, providing that you have the participants. And you'll eventually be able to take the traffic from, which is the way everything's going, the main chain onto Hydra. You'll be able to use things like Mithril, other things, a collection of things, and Hydra itself to verify it, have the same security as the layer 1, and then bring it back on. So this is kind of, and if this all happens under one interface, you can see really how Cardano becomes a very advanced blockchain and tackles many problems that others are still yet to sort of implement and solve in a safe manner. Remember, the Cardano chain has had zero downtime since it started producing blocks. So you got rollups and validiums. Rollups work by converting layer 1 execution costs, running a smart contract on layer 1 into a layer 1 data cost, storing the data on the layer 1. Since data is much cheaper than execution, layer 2 systems typically achieve much lower transaction costs while still inheriting the decentralization and safety of the underlying layer 1, as all data required to reconstruct the layer 2 state is embedded into the underlying chain. Rollups are often paired with systems to cheaply provide the current layer 2 state to the underlying layer 1, typically with fraud proofs. So this is kind of Mithril, if you will. And so on and so forth. You've got DC Spark also doing this. They've got Pyama Engine. This is for gaming, essentially. Gaming is going to be huge. And then it talks about validiums. Validiums are much cheaper, but often require being paired with another storage solution. Storage is a huge... This is just a shout out. If you're looking to invest in crypto, some storage products are going to become massive because they're so needed. And this is actually somewhere we're pretty focused on getting. You've got off-chain computing. Then you've got Mithril. To achieve greater scalability, it is necessary to address the complexity of critical operations that depend algorithmically on the number of participants. Mithril is an IOG-developed protocol that acts as a stake-based threshold signature scheme for allowing transparent, secure, and lightweight stake leveraging. Mithril will improve chain synchronization while maintaining trust. The result is fast and efficient multi-chain signature aggregation without compromising security features. The conclusion. So to round all this off, guys, because this has gone on for 20 minutes, but hopefully by the end of this, you've kind of come to sort of a good understanding of the vision for Cardano and how it's all coming together and understand it a little bit better. The conclusion is A blockchain network works in mysterious ways, and some of the concepts surrounding a decentralized ledger ecosystem can be hard to understand. Not so layer 1 and layer 2. If you are to use the cake as a visualization expression, the layer 1 is the cake stand and the layer 2 is the cake tiers. There can be multiple of them. Key takeaways: Cardano is a layer 1. The base network, the layer 2 solutions, is a structure built on top of the layer 1 chain to address the latter limitations, such as transaction speed issues. Bitcoin Lightning Network is a great example of this. Absolutely, Bitcoin is not scalable on the layer 1, so they're rerouting the traffic, but using the layer 1 to sort of verify that the transactions have all gone through. Horizontal scaling can work in 2 ways, so on and so forth. So I thought this was a really brilliant article. We have actually interviewed Sebastian Guillemont, one of the individuals here. Shout out to the other 2. One recently contributed as recent, or they all actually contributed pretty recently. Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that. I thought it was really good to sort of go over and understand these things. Certainly if you're an investor, it's always good to know what you're investing in. And if you're just someone that's interested in Cardano, hopefully this has given you kind of a bit more of an overview of everything and how it's all coming together. And we've not spoken about a lot of things in this video, like Midnight, like Marlowe, a whole list of things that Cardano also has that can also be described as layer 2s, but also plugins. And eventually what you'll have is, if you were a builder, you'll basically be able to come to Cardano, and this is what Marlowe's trying to do, and you'll be able to build, and you'll be able to leverage all of these different layers, all of these different protocols, all of these different parameters, and create this really efficient super app, if you will. On that note, I'm going to love and leave you. Hopefully you enjoyed the content. If you did like us, appreciate it as a comment. Don't forget the All in Crypto stake pool, and we'll see you all in the next YouTube video. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. See you in the next one.